Greetings, YouTube. It's going to be a bit of a strange one. Probably tell that from the title. When is it appropriate to horrify someone without preparation? There's a story I read many, many moons ago, back when I was reading fiction. And in it, it was a woman who discovers she's pregnant, and she didn't have a partner. So no clue how this happened. And then she discovers that she has descended unknowingly, because she was separated from her family, from a line of women that had been genetically modified to go into a state of parthenogenesis, where they just have a child at a specific point in their life. Boom, it happens. It's a clone of them. That line will then continue. I've always loved that idea. But thrusting that kind of concept on someone could be very problematic. Look at one of the best science fiction / horror movies ever made, Alien. And the most profoundly terrifying aspect of that is that you were implanted, you were impregnated against your will. And then when the thing was birthed, you died. So it's a major metaphor for rape, loss of bodily autonomy and agency, and it plays quite nicely into our current hellscape that involves abortion in America. But that idea that that was the scariest thing, a second, okay, I have to get that back there. The scariest thing that the director could think of was rape and forced birth. And that is one of the greatest examples I can think of bodily, a body horror. Just boom. And the director did not prepare the actors in that room for what was going to happen. The only actor that knew what was something going to happen was the one on the table. So when that chest burster did its thing, the reactions of the people around it were genuine. But it was a beautiful scene. You could never fake that. You could never do it again. You got one take. And it was a masterpiece. But what would happen if, particularly in a science fiction or science fantasy setting, where you have like Marvel superhero style mutations, like say Gamma World, any versions of the Gamma World, or the derivative games from Gamma World. My particular favorite is the 1992 edition. What if one of the mutations that a mutant had was parthenogenesis? They just didn't know it. They didn't get it from somebody else. In this world, mutations just... So they get to a specific age and they find themselves pregnant. What does a character do with that? What does a player do with that? That could be crossing a line. But if you warn the player, you ruin the moment. Just like if you had warned those actors around that table before that chest burster did its thing, it burst the chest, you would have ruined the scene. Now, I have unfortunately traumatized somebody in a game once. Did not know I was traumatizing a person in the game because I was not doing something that was particularly problematic, and no one else at the table thought it was problematic. This was an issue with this particular person's mental health that I didn't know was going to be triggered, so it was a mistake on my part. I knew the person very well, but I didn't think that this particular action was going to cause that. And in the scene, there was this blowhard that had kind of blustered his way into court. And the player characters were all involved with this woman who was, I believe, a duchess. And so this guy's like literally kind of marching around. He's almost gesture-like. But then he like falls to the ground falls to his knees and begins to scream. And bursting forth from him was like this apparition that had essentially implanted a gate inside his body. And then at a specific time, the gate opened, splitting him into hamburger, and out forth this thing came in an attempt to kill this Duchess. They were able to defeat it, but one of the players at my table, was freaked out by this because they had been amused by the goofy little man, and then the goofy little man turned into a horrible thing. Now that was my purpose. It was not my purpose to genuinely hurt someone emotionally. But occasionally, I like the idea of disturbing people. Another occasion, I was playing, and it was just far before I had been diagnosed with diabetes, but I'd already begun to kind of have restless legs at that time. So I occasionally, while GMing, I would get up, and in this particular setting, it was a large room, and I would kind of walk back and forth, but it was very appropriate because of the wall. There was a big map of the world and everything, so I was kind of like, it was very appropriate. It was contextual. So occasionally I just kind of walk back and forth, and I'm doing the whole GM thing, because this particular scene didn't require any real dice rolling. And they had essentially triggered a ghost unknowingly. And I started to kind of play him. In a sense, they suddenly realized that this figure walking back and forth was the ghost and they're watching him kind of do this, and they don't understand what he's doing. And then I turned to a corner, like a corner in the room. And then and I turned back around, and I looked at the room, and I just said, it's all wrong. And I just began to recite his tale of horror of being stuck here because he couldn't complete the last thing he needed to complete, which was a symphony. He needed those notes, and he couldn't do it because his hands just passed through everything. And for the one moment, everyone at that table looked at me and thought I was insane. It was glorious. But what if you do something like that to someone when it comes to pregnancy? If you warn them, moment's lost. If you don't warn them, trauma could be a consequence, and that's not cool. So how do you judge that? Do you throw the idea out, make it as a non-player character has the particular trait? That way they don't have to, it's not something that's affecting the player characters. It's affecting one of their secondary, aids or something. Or do you take the gamble to find out just how they react to something that profoundly life-altering for their character and potentially deeply disturbing for their player?